Hello. Good to have you on campus, and grateful for the opportunity to share some thoughts with you as we go forward, and grateful that you're tuning into this experience. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce myself a little bit. I've got a visual to help walk through a little bit what my experience and my journey has been. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Talk about embracing differences. I think it's important for you to know a little bit of my background. So my mother is Caucasian. She grew up in Green Bay, Wisconsin. And my father is African American. He's from Baltimore, Maryland. But I didn't meet my father until I was 26. I grew up in Pocatello, Idaho. I know, Green Bay, Baltimore, Idaho. It's a long story. And when I was in Pocatello, I spent a lot of my free time mountain biking during high school, so you can see a picture at the top of one of my favorite trails. I am a convert to the church. I'm still the only member of my immediate family. I served a mission in Uruguay, Montevideo West, and I still maintain the Spanish and was able to keep that fluent. Upon returning from my mission, I started my associate's degree from Utah Valley State College, which is now UVU. And then I received my bachelor's degree in teaching from BYU after transferring there. My first job upon graduation was at a little high school in Florence, Arizona. And then I started full-time working at BYU in 2005, and I started working in the Multicultural Student Services office. It was during that time that I had the opportunity to get my master's degree in public administration. I found a little correlation. If BYU basketball wants to be good, I need to go back to school because I was doing a master's degree right in the middle of Jim Romania. I still think he deserves a spot in the NBA. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. I have really important connections and strong connections to my ancestral roots in South Carolina. That's where my father is from. And there's a picture there of me in front of a cotton field, and that's about a half a mile from my great grandmother's house, and that's likely one of the places where she picked as a small child. After Multicultural Student Services, I went to the Student Leadership Office, which is now the Student Connection and Leadership Center. And also during my time here at BYU, you can see the picture of the bus. I've been involved with the BYU Civil Rights Seminar for the last 9 years, and it gives us an opportunity to go down south and visit Atlanta, Selma, Montgomery, Birmingham. Obviously, John Lewis has been in the news a lot, and he's one of my personal heroes, and I've had an opportunity to walk in his footsteps. And I'm currently a doctoral student in the Educational Leadership and Foundations program here at BYU. I'm hoping to be graduated in April 22. So for those of you who are listening to this and preparing for your graduation, I hope to be done before you are. My wife, Amy, and I, we have 7 children. My oldest is a freshman here at BYU. And then my youngest is 2, and then you can see in that picture there's everywhere in between. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of background of the variety of my experiences and things that I've gone through in my life. So with the next, I want to show you, there's been a lot of discussions about bubbles right now, and I'm a huge NBA fan. I love the NBA, and so there's sometimes BYU is affectionately referred to as a bubble as well. It's because we come together and there are a lot of people of the same religion. And from a diversity standpoint, there could be some increase in that as well. And so people talk about it being a bubble, but the one thing about BYU, it's an incredible opportunity to be educated in the light of the gospel of Jesus Christ and to be learning really important skills and to gain important knowledge in that light. of the gospel of Jesus Christ. But what's really interesting is this bubble also presents some challenges. When your church life and your social life and your academic life, they all can kind of get blurred really quickly. And some of the challenges that will present potentially for you as you start your BYU journey, some of you will find new and important aspects of living the gospel according to the teachings of Jesus Christ, and you haven't had exposure to them growing up, and it will be a stretching experience that might be a little bit uncomfortable for you as you find new ways to understand and learn the gospel. Conversely, on the other side, some of you will find that things that you thought were essential parts of your faith were actually just regional preferences or traditions in your family, and it's going to require you to recalibrate a little bit so that you can understand what faith means both to you and to other people. And both of faith can look different for different people. The gospel is central. The gospel is consistent. But how people express their faith and how people carry that out is different. And yet both of them are still faith. And you'll have to challenge that. So I want to talk about brave and safe space as you learn to work through your differences and figure out what other people's look like as well. So brave and safe space, that's a space where honesty, sensitivity, respect are present, even when discussing controversial, sensitive topics. That is a huge issue right now in the world that we live in, finding a way to be able to discuss these topics in a way that is not controversial and a way that people just get the opportunity to express who they are and what they care about. So in order to discuss brave and safe spaces, let me go ahead and give you some things that we need to look at in order to do that. So courage is required. You've got to be able to step outside of your comfort zone to be able to talk about those things. Vulnerability is required. You may have to be able to say something that may be difficult for you to say, or you don't want to say it the wrong way, and you don't want it to come across the wrong way, but opening yourself up to just being able to say it. And courage and vulnerability can both be developed in order to make a brave and a safe space. And I'll talk a little bit more about what those two things mean. When you're in a safe space, your safe space is just, you feel comfortable there, you're okay there, things are all right. But a brave space takes it to another level where you can engage in conversations and get to a better position, get to a better spot with somebody else where there's not any inhibitors to you being able to express how you feel, and you feel comfortable and you feel confident in that space. And that's ultimately, I think, where we want to be, particularly in a university setting where we're exchanging ideas and we're interacting with people from all over the place. We need to be able to create these kinds of spaces and be able to do it safely. So I want to build this little house to formulate this brave and safe space that we want to create. So from a foundational aspect, you look at, all of us have our own foundation. So you have a background, and that's kind of the external factors before you were born that contribute to your view of the world. That's your background. The knowledge that you have is what you have formally and informally learned as you've just interacted with the world around you, your family, your friends, and where you grew up. Your life experience is how, where, when, and what you have done, and how those things influence you and influence how you see the world. And your perspective is how all of those things come together to determine how you view the world. And so when you have a whole bunch of different people coming to a university with different backgrounds, knowledge, and life experiences, you've got a whole lot of perspectives coming into a small space, relatively speaking, in relation to the world. And it's important to understand that that is a foundational concept for you. And lastly, that foundation should be a spiritual anchor. For members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, that anchor is Jesus Christ and the atonement and the resurrection. For those of you who may not be from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, whatever spiritual connection or recharge that you tap into, it's important for you to be able to have that foundation of whatever that looks like for you. So that's our foundation. That's what we're going to operate from to build safe and brave and safe spaces. Now we want to build one of the walls. Before I go on, a scripture from the Book of Mormon. And now, my sons, remember that it is upon the rock of our Redeemer, who is Christ, the Son of God, that ye must build your foundation, the rock upon which ye are built, which is a sure foundation, a foundation whereon if men build, they cannot fail. And now I want to talk about some tools to build the wall. And I want to have a brave and safe conversation with you about what these tools look like. Identity. Obviously, there's a lot of discussion about identity right now. But I'm going to define identity simply as developing a firm understanding of where you came from, why you're here, and where you're going. This approach to identity relates to a lot of things. Physically, emotionally, spiritually, academically. Those three kind of fundamental questions determine a lot of things in a lot of different realms. And all of us, I think, are in the process of trying to figure out our identity. And then I want to talk about three terms that I think too often we use interchangeably, but they actually mean very, very different things. So culture are distinct ideas, customs, social behaviors, products, or a way of life for a particular group of people. That's the social environment that helps someone develop. And the culture can be those things that you learn. Now, ethnicity is different than culture. Ethnicity is your membership in a group that's usually tied to an ancestry. It's also like geographically where you grew up, politically how you were influenced. All those things factor into ethnicity and identification with a particular group of people who had similar experiences from yours. Now, race is just a biological identifier. And really, it just boils down to your genetic characteristics. But too often, we talk about those three things as being interchangeable when they're very, very different. Let me give you an example. So culturally, I grew up in Idaho. There was one of three black kids in my high school. And that influenced a lot of just what I did and how I carried myself and worrying about what people thought about me. But later in life, as I found my father, my upbringing and how I view myself has been heavily influenced by my connection to South Carolina, my connection to Maryland, my connection to my father after finding him when I was 26. And so for me, my culture in no way, shape, or form has been static. It's evolved over the course of the years. So ethnically, I'm African American Caucasian. So there are certain experiences within that context that I identify with that don't have to necessarily be the same, but we have some shared experiences in that. But what's interesting, racially, particularly here at BYU, I'm often mistaken for being Polynesian. And that's because of what people see. I'm 6 foot, I'm brown, I'm bald, and I look like a football coach. So people often mistake me for being Polynesian. But I don't get that when I go to Maryland. I don't get that when I go to South Carolina, because people don't have many experiences with Polynesians there. It's predominantly black as the predominant minority group. So you can see, even in my own experience, the differences between race, ethnicity, and culture have really interesting impacts. Let me give you another example of kind of a disturbing phrase that I hear here at BYU. And this is particularly amongst Caucasian students, where I've unfortunately heard Caucasian students say, "I don't have any culture." What does that message actually mean? I don't feel like I have anything that I feel makes me unique or special, that makes me stand out. And I don't think that's the message that you want to internalize, nor do you want to send to anybody else. And so sometimes, unfortunately, when we're talking about race, ethnicity, and culture, that term or that comment, "I don't have any culture," is tied directly to race, meaning I'm not brown, I don't stick out like they do. Oftentimes when I hear this, people are confusing those two things. Now, I want to make sure you understand something, that black and white are not cultural identifiers. So culturally, if you're Caucasian, you might be from a pioneer heritage whose family crossed the plains to come to Utah, and that's a strong tie to your culture. But ethnically, you might be Irish, English, Dutch, German, and that would influence some of your family's traditions and how you grew up. But racially, referred to as white or Caucasian. And so hopefully you can see how those things are different. And it's important for us to understand each one of those components if we're going to embrace each other's differences. And in order to embrace each other's differences, we have to understand where each other are coming from. And we have to understand ourselves first and foremost before we do anything. So if there's one thing I want you to walk away from as you're interacting with other people, race is not culture and culture is not race. And too often those things are being misconstrued, particularly now in the environment that we live in. And then the last piece I want to talk to you about with these tools is difference. And this is a skill that I've developed in my life when I'm looking at others. And there's snap judgments that we make. We see something and we rush to kind of, we've got so much input and data coming in that it's just easier for us to make a quick snap judgment based on what we see. But in all reality, difference presents a really interesting opportunity because I always ask myself, what's their story? And when I find myself asking people what their story is, I look at them differently. Because if they do something that doesn't jive with me or that I disagree with, if I ask myself what's their story, then I think about who they are, where they came from, how did they formulate those ideas, and it makes me see things in a different light because I want them to understand my story as well. And then the last one I want to talk about are stereotypes. And I think there's two terms that are thrown around too much, stereotypes and prejudice. Stereotypes are nothing more but defense mechanisms, what life has taught us, that there are concerns and dangers, and because of the life experience that you've had, you've developed certain stereotypes, and you react to those stereotypes. And it takes a lot of mental and emotional energy to try to overcome those stereotypes to get to know people because of all the data that we've got coming at us that tell us about certain people. But stereotypes I would not necessarily consider bad. Actively overcoming stereotypes is where we all want to be. It's when we take stereotypes and we treat people poorly because of those stereotypes, and we use those as justification to shun people, injure people, or worse. That's when it becomes prejudice, and that's where we need to fight against it. So that's one wall. Now the other wall on the other side are some skills that we need to develop in order to create these brave and safe spaces. So sympathy. Sympathy is the ability to see someone else and their state has an impact on you. Whether they're sad, whether they're happy, you can sympathize with what it is that they're experiencing and say, yeah, because of the mood that's there, I'm going to respond to that mood. I'm going to be sympathetic. Now, sympathy is not necessarily sensitivity. Sensitivity is actually having the ability to feel when you see something or experience something. And empathy, I think oftentimes empathy and sympathy are also confused with one another. But empathy, you don't just go from, yeah, I can see that person's sad, so that kind of makes me sad. Empathy takes it to a new level where you make a conscious effort to try to understand and appreciate where it is that they're coming from. And when we feel empathy or when we try to demonstrate empathy, that leads us to compassion. And compassion is more than empathy because compassion actually moves us to want to relieve someone's suffering. We want to do something about what we see to give them a better opportunity. And in order for us to develop all of those things, it requires humility. Humility is a willingness to receive inspiration. It's a willingness to learn. It's a willingness to change and saying, you know, I don't know what I don't know, but I'm willing to try to find that out. And if finding that out makes it a better situation for somebody else, then I want to do what's necessary to be able to make that an opportunity for somebody else. So a couple of things that I want to point out to you with the building of this house. If I can go back to the slides really quick. So Nelson Mandela said, as I've said, the first thing is to be honest with yourself. You can never have an impact on society if you have not changed yourself. Great peacemakers are all people of integrity, of honesty, and humility. And in order to know yourself integrity, honesty, and humility are absolutely essential. It's hard to change someone else's life if you aren't focusing on the things that you can change first. And so when we want to cultivate these skills, we've got to practice respecting, hearing, listening. And I want you to think about those are three separate things: practice, respecting, hearing, and listening. And then we all have to, if we come to the point where we can accept our own human nature and our own faults and our own fallacies, then we're going to want other people to excuse our faults and fallacies, and we in turn hopefully can develop the compassion to do the same for other people. And I think of gratitude, developing gratitude and expressing gratitude, recognizing the opportunities and blessings that we have that other people may not have. And when we can develop that gratitude, then we want to reach out and provide ways for other people to experience some of the same things that we've experienced. Sorry, this one got a little out of whack. So in what circumstances do we want to use these skills? Just some things for you to think about. When students, ethnic minority students, low socioeconomic status has an impact on students' experiences here. If they're from urban or rural communities, mental, emotional illness, first-generation college students, international students, gender identity, and I would even say gender equality, student accessibility are all things that factor into how someone views the world when they get here to the university. And if you've got a thought about how all those things may impact someone coming into it, let me give you, for example, if you've got one of your roommates who maybe they don't go out with you on the weekends, and they always seem to be gone every evening when you're off with the rest of the roommates. Have you ever stopped to ask, why are you always gone? Maybe they've got to work the 20 hours they're allowed to work on campus, and maybe they've got some additional off-campus jobs that they've got to work in order to try to make ends meet and maybe to take care of someone back home as well. So it's important for you to get to know the people around you so you understand what it is they're experiencing and what they're going through. And in the end, that leads to inclusion. And this is the action, practice, or policy of including any person in an activity, system, organization, or process, irrespective of race, gender, religion, age, ability, etc. And inclusion is an active thing. It's not something that just happens. It doesn't spontaneously just generate itself. We have to actively work to build inclusive communities together. And each one of us is important in this process. As you join this BYU community, you have to be an active participant in doing this. And it requires practice, it requires intention, attention, and I would also say it requires that degree of humility, of willingness to make mistakes, and to be okay with those mistakes being made, and to get back up and try again. And at the end, our hope is that we create brave and safe spaces for all of us here at BYU, and that's the end goal. So just in wrapping up, the vision of the Student Connection and Leadership Center that I have the privilege of working in, our vision statement spells out that we inspire students to create lasting connection, foster inclusion, cultivate skills and talents, and live with integrity. As we want to be one of those brave and safe spaces. We want to be a space where many different people from many different walks of life and many different academic disciplines and all those kind of things can come together in one space and share in a common purpose to want to connect with one another and better understand one another and add to their education, not just through their textbooks and through the instruction and their professors, but add to their education because of the people that they interact with on a day-to-day basis. The Student Connection and Leadership Center is a new name for our office. It used to be Student Leadership, and that connection piece was very important to us because that's where I saw our lasting impact as a center as I looked at the lives of students who have come in and have left, the advantageous connections they've made, the lifelong friendships that have helped them get through really, really difficult times, the continued correspondence years after they've left the office. It's such a valuable and an amazing thing. So in conclusion, I do want to offer you, I do want to extend one challenge to you. I would love to, if someone in the chat can give my email really quick. It's super easy, abb@byu.edu. I would love for you to get back with me in about a month. And as you've tried to actively think about these concepts and actively think about the things that I've discussed, I'd like to hear what your experiences are about this. And if you find yourself having a difficult time finding a brave and a safe space to share what your experience is, I hope you can view our office as one of the many places across campus where you can come in and look for opportunities to connect and look for opportunities to be heard as well. And if you're up to it, I would love for you to put your email in the chat as well. And in about a month, I'll reach out to you and I'll see how things are going for you, and have an opportunity for you to connect. You're in the middle of kind of a fog as you're trying to transition into things, and I know there's a lot coming at you right now. And so the things that I'm sharing with you and the things that I'm talking about, they may not resonate right now, but maybe within a month of your experience, you'll look back and you'll say, what did that guy say again? And I'd love to just give you a reminder and a follow-up and potentially a pick-me-up as you embark on this new journey. So thanks so much for your time.